This is Death, Sex, and Money. I'm Anna Sale. And with us here tonight is Nikki Giovanni. She has written dozens of books, starting with her debut poetry collection in 1968, Black Feeling, Black Talk. She wrote love poems, which I discovered in high school and was very meaningful to me. And most recently, a collection, A Good Cry, which is out in paperback tomorrow. She's the author of 3 New York Times bestselling books, recipient of 7 NAACP Image Awards, shortlisted for the National Book Award, and a University Distinguished Professor at Virginia Tech, where she's taught for more than 30 years. We are going to talk for about an hour. We're going to take audience questions, and Nikki has graciously offered to sign copies of her books out in the lobby afterwards, and A Good Cry is for sale out there if you don't have your copy yet. But that's the formal introduction, Nikki. I want to start by hearing how you describe yourself. And on the back of your new paperback, will you read what it says about the author?
I had a big fight I won this. I didn't win it on the hardcover. About the author. A long time ago, a little girl sat in the window of her bedroom she shared with her older sister and read by finger flashlight. I don't know if you all remember. Lone Ranger used to do that if you saved enough back time, and you could get the flashlight. She looked at the stars when the battery gave away, and when she got older, she snuggled under her grandmother's quilts to listen to jazz on the radio all night, or at least until she fell asleep. She first fell in love with words. Then they somehow seemed to fall in love with her. She got to learn history, meet people, travel everywhere, and since this is a good fairy tale, she lives happily ever after. There may be other things along the way, but the words and the stars and the music are all that matters.
Thank you.
I've been trying to get them to stop saying things that, and I'm not, it's just not, it's insignificant. And so, you end up, well, she graduated from high school and then she went to college, and what the hell? And I wanted to say something so that if you're reading this, you might know something. But it's only on the paperback, so I have fallen in love. Rachel is my editor, and I have fallen in love with my paperback now. The hardcover, for those of you who collect books, and if you live 50 years, you can sell it for something. But it's the paperback that I think is so... It's so wonderful, really, and it is all a fairy tale. Hell, you live and you die, and so you may as well be happy.
So if you already have the hardcover, get the paperback too. That's what she's saying.
No.
Well, I'm so excited to be here in New York City with you because when I think of your life in New York City, when you were a young woman. What a time. You arrive here when you're about 25.
I guess so.
Within 5 years, you've co-written a book with James Baldwin. You're interviewing Lena Horne on television. You're going on tour with Muhammad Ali. Your first breakthrough poetry reading was at the jazz club Birdland. Mm-hmm. You're in the middle of this incredible scene of art and Black power and intellectual thought and politics. When you think back to that time, what were you learning about how the world worked, being amongst all that at that time in your life?
Well, it was an exciting period, of course, and that goes without saying. I think the main thing that I learned is that why not? And so, if there's one group of people that I know, and I shouldn't say this, I'm sure we're on podcast or something, but I probably know more prisoners than anybody else. And I do, they write you and you write back and they write back, And so Harold Logan, as you know, well, you might not, Harold Logan owned Birdland with Wilson Pickett. And, Harold was a big prisoner. And he was a crook. And so I just went down, that's what he did. And so, but he had Birdland. And so it was like, I went down, Birdland was down, and so I went down to meet Mr. Logan. How are you, Mr. Logan? I'm Nikki Giovanni, I'm a poet. What do I have to do to get your club? I'd like to have a reading, but what do I have to do? And I think Harold just looking like, whoa. And he said, well, finally, because it goes back and forth, he said, well, bring me 100 people, because Sunday in New York then clubs were closed. And he said, bring me 100 people, and you can have the club. 99 people, and you owe me $500. And I said, oh, that's fine, and we shook hands. I walked back upstairs, and I remembered, oh, I just shook hands with a murderer. I have to find 100 people. So I was very lucky. Of course, my next door neighbor was Morgan Freeman at that time, and that helped, and
that helped.
Novella Nelson, that helped, Melba Moore. So, but we did, I really worked very hard, and what was so wonderful, and this was a breakthrough, was that people started coming to Birdland that Sunday, and they started to sort of pack in. Well, that's when Birdland is here, New York Times is there. And so, and I'm not saying the Times is prejudiced, because I don't think the Times are, and I think it's a great paper, but the Times is looking down, and mostly black people, and they are there, and then they are there, and then they turned a corner. So they finally sent somebody down, a reporter down, to say, what is going on? And the black people said, black judgment is coming. Which was my book. So you see where we're going with that. And guys, well, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. So he finally got to me. He said, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. And I said, well, I'm Nikki Giovanni. He said, no, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. Where's he? I said, I don't know where he is, but, because there's no point in talking to a fool, And we finally got that straightened out. And what happened there was that I made the second newsprint.
Wow.
And that's going to be good, because the New York Times. And I was pleased, I went out and bought several copies and, sent it home to my mother, things like that. And
was the headline Black Judgment is Coming?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I think the headline was ego tripping. But it was just one of those, careers are very strange. And we said, but I think the main thing about any career is that you have to enjoy it. And you have to ask for what you want. And so I had asked Mr. Logan, by the way, was murdered by Eddie on Broadway. And I was very sorry he was murdered, because, damn it, we had just made a good friendship. And, you hate it when the people get killed. It's okay. But well, you do. But I thought, okay, well, what hasn't been done? And the next thing that hadn't been done here in New York, of course, was Lincoln Center. And Packy McGinnis was running Lincoln Center. So I went over, made an appointment to see Mr. McGinnis. And, hi, I'm a poet. What do I have to do?
Where did that come from, that thought, what hasn't been done? I'm going to go have a meeting and do it.
I'm still doing that. We were talking, we were laughing in there, but see, I'm in love right now. My granddaughter, God bless her, my granddaughter's named Kai, and Kai just wrote me a note and said that, and she's right, I'm in love with the little worm that lives in the Arctic. And she said, we're going to go to the Arctic Circle, all things being equal, we're going to go to the Arctic Circle, because this worm is going to be the next living thing. Humans are the biggest, as we all know, humans are the biggest predators. And the next biggest predators are sea urchin. And what's going to take over from the sea urchin is going to be this worm, because it is warmer and it's coming down. And it's just, you just start to think, well, what haven't I seen, what don't I know? And I've been to the Antarctica, and that was very, I really like that. But I want to see, I probably won't see the worm, because I keep doing this, but it's almost not seeable. It's just a little teeny tiny worm, but it is surviving and building a community, and that we do know. And anything that can live under 45 degrees freezing is just going to take over. And we don't like it, but it is, because human beings can't get along with each other. So we can't get along with something we don't know.
So speaking about survival, thinking back to that time in New York, when you arrive, a few years later, you're a mother, you're a poet. What did you learn about money and how you were going to support yourself during those years?
Yeah, and again, it's a weakness of mine. It still is. I just don't think that college graduates can't support themselves. I was better looking then, so I knew that if worse came to worse, I could stand on the corner and make a little bit of money. Well, if I'm going to be a whore, I'd rather be on the corner than working for Donald Trump, I can tell you that. But it's not something to worry about. It's something you say to yourself, well, I want to be a I wanted to be a poet. I mean, at that point, I'm writing poetry. I don't know if I had been as brilliant as Toni Morrison, I could have written a novel, and then, you know, you have a whole nother level. And my good friend, whom I love so much, Kwame Alexander, has taken novels, and he's done something else. I taught Kwame, and I'm so proud of him. He's just such a wonderful young man. But it was the 60s. And so the first thing you had to figure out is, what am I trying to get done? How do I contribute? What can I do? I'm not going to change the world. I really don't think anybody ever listens to poets, so it doesn't matter what you say. Nobody ever listened to poets. If they did, it'd be a whole different world. And so I just wanted to, I wasn't, and I'm still not, and I should be, I suppose. But it's nothing to worry about. You know, you're not going to starve to death, and you're not going to freeze to death, and somehow or another you're going to, there's always I come from an incredible, in all fairness, and this is not Nikki's lecture on black people, but I come from an incredible people. And when we look at what black Americans have come through, and when you look at how we talked, okay, I'm a poet, but I come from a people who invented the spiritual, who found a way to tell a story that if people thought they could read and write, that could cost them their lives. And I'm not going to get killed for writing bad poetry, but there are people who have gotten killed for trying to tell the truth. And so I just think that all I wanted to do was my share. And I had a story to tell, and I thought that I should tell it. I have a different story to tell at 75 than I did at 25. 50 years makes a difference. And so if there's a poet listening to us right now, one of the things I would say is, don't read your early poetry. No, because if you do, you won't want to contradict yourself. And if you don't contradict yourself, you didn't learn anything. It's a very different world of 25 and 50. So you're still just looking, and I observe. It's what I do best, is look. And in looking, I just try to figure out, okay, how is this working, and what can I say about it, and what can I, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this either, but you're expecting.
I
And
am.
everybody.
You're allowed to say it.
And yeah, I think that's a good idea. And it has nothing to do with me. But she is. And lately I've been dealing with Mary, because everybody, you know, your baby's coming in December. And everybody's always saying, you know, Mary was in a manger, and isn't this terrible? And then I was thinking about if you had a question of a manger or Holiday Inn Express, this, excuse me, Holiday Inn Express, but the manger's we. I mean, that's way better. And in the manger, of course, Joseph is outside probably smoking weed or something, but in the manger, you have a cow that's going to have so it's got a rhythm. You've got the donkey, it's got a rhythm. So you have a friend. Mary's got a friend now. She's got a couple of people that are keeping her warm. But what I wanted to share with you that was interesting, that is interesting to me, is, as we who are mothers in this room know, the baby comes. Now, there's Jesus, so he's not going to be a lot of trouble. It's like, okay, Mom, I'm coming, you know. The rest of us have ordinary children, so we had a problem with it, but Jesus not going to be a problem. But you're still going to have the string, the cord. And then I was thinking, well, who cut the cord for Mary? And I realized only the mice who are in the manger. The mice, the least of those, did an important job. The mice came and cut the cord. And of course, the cord had to be taken away, because otherwise the ants would come. And so it's midnight, as we know. So the bats came to carry the cord away. So Mary had a baby in a manger and called him Jesus. And all of the life in the manger helped her. I think it's incredible. I mean, and I come from a people who studied and learned and tried to think, what does it mean? Because we, who are black, 200, 300 years ago, had the same situation. We had those babies, and people took them away from us, and people did other things. But what I really love about it is that rich white people, and you have to like rich white people. Rich, well, you do. But rich white people didn't want their wives' breasts messed up. And so what they would do is come down into the slave quarters and find out which woman had had a baby. Well, we know you are what you eat. So we know that there's no such thing as white Americans. That's true. That's just one of those things. Well, that's what, but that's true. You are what you eat. And so since they have all been eating off of us, I love it. Don't you know when, well, I won't get invited back, but it's just a lot of little things to think about because we've been letting people take away from us some of the most beautiful things on planet Earth. And one of the most beautiful things is that we, and I'm not saying white people don't, I'm just saying we in the black community have gotten along with everybody. And what you love about the spirituals is that there is not one single spiritual that does revenge, that does hatred, that doesn't. We have found a way to love. And I think it's just incredible.
You know, I thought a lot about that reading A Good Cry, and because of the way you talk about joy and laughter and the gift, particularly for Black Americans, about having joy and laughter in the face of humiliation, suffering, terror. Do you think that laughter for you got in the way of learning how to cry?
No, I think I didn't learn how to cry because, and it took me a long time to write this particular book. My father was, I think, a little on the crazy side. And if you ask me, what was I doing at 11 o'clock any Saturday night, I was listening to him hit my mother. And there was something I couldn't deal with, and so what you can't deal with, you have to put away. And all of us in this room who are my age know that you have to put it away, because if you try to change, you can't change it. I couldn't do anything about their marriage. What I did learn was that their marriage was none of my business. And what I learned, secondly, is that the most precious thing on God's earth are grandmothers. And they are. I recommend them. And I am one now, but I have a great-grandmother, a wonderful grandmother. And I went down, and I know now that grandmother must have known some of the difficulty Mommy was going through. But I said to her, you know, is it okay if I stay with you? And of course she did that thing that women do, but it wasn't true. She said, I'll have to ask John Brown. It was my grandfather. But she didn't ask anybody anything. They already knew. And so I lived with grandmother and grandpapa for a while. And so it wasn't that, it's that I held things in. And I have a doctor whom I love a lot too, Gregory. And Gregory's good looking. I told Gregory, if you weren't good looking, I wouldn't listen to you. But that's the truth. But Gregory says that the reason I had a seizure, and the reason I had the seizure is that I hadn't learned, you know, I ate too much salt. You know how they go through. I don't care what's wrong with you. If you're a black woman, you eat too much salt. And if you're a white woman, you're overweight, right? I mean, you hear the same crap all the time. And I said, Gregory, that's not true. I think the reason that I had the seizure is that I have never learned to cry. And what I have to do is learn to cry. And I have given you a gift, which I've given Gregory a gift. Because what he needs to do is work on a program called the Nikki. And somebody comes in and they're having a seizure. He needs to say, oh, you've got the Nikki. And then he needs to show them how to do it. You know, a little, you know, champagne here, a couple of goldfish there. And you kind of work it, you know, you need to work it out. I think that I held things in. Most of my life I've held things in. And I finally did learn to cry, which is how I got to.
How did you learn?
I'm 75 years old. Damn, if I don't learn soon, I'll be dead. So, no, I think I learned because I am, because I'm a grandmother, and my dog has his shots, and my house is paid for, and the car is paid for. You know, the little things that matter. And so now you realize I've done my job. So I can now
Exhale.
Let that go. I mean, I went down to the African American Museum, which is just totally wonderful, just wonderful. And I went to the legacy opening, not to the presidential, because, you know, you do things with presidential things and it's a mess. I went down for the legacy opening, and for those of us who've been, you know, it goes around and round. And I turned right. And had I turned left, I would have gone into the little room that you tell your story. And the not to say old ladies, but the old ladies in the little wheelchairs, they were all having their stories. So I turned right. And when I turned right, there's a picture of me. And yeah, it was incredible. And I looked, and without thinking, I turned to say, grandmother, see, I did my job. And I think that that's when, maybe the first time I learned to cry, that I felt like grandmother knew I did my job. As you can see, now you learn how to cry. You just cry over any damn thing, you know.
Can I ask you to read a poem?
Sure.
Can I ask you to read I Married My Mother from your new collection?
I love that. That is one of my favorite poems because actually I did. Gus got, my father, Gus had a stroke, and Mommy called me. And I was living here in New York, I live uptown. And Mommy called, and she said, you know, your father's in the hospital. Well, Mommy knew I couldn't have cared. What she should have called me to say is he dead. But that's the truth, I didn't like him. And I knew that if she called, she needed something. That's why I think daughters are such a good idea. I mean, if you have, I don't know what you're having, but...
I'm having a daughter.
Oh, daughters are just, I mean, I had a son, and sons are wonderful. They take care of you, they do a lot of things, but daughters, you can gossip with and stuff. And daughters were just wonderful. And I knew when she called, my job was to go home, go back to Cincinnati. And I had Thomas then, and I had a dog, Duke, and I had a little Volkswagen. And so we went.
Your son, and the dog got in the car and went home.
And drove to Cincinnati. And, you know, took care of him. Gus and I never did sort of get along. Once he did, and there's a longer story to that, but once he did die, Mommy and I were sitting there. Now, Mommy drank, speaking of beer, Kavanaugh was talking about beer, but Mommy drank beer. No, that's a whole nother discussion. But Mommy drank beer. I didn't. I cook with beer. I still cook with beer. I don't drink it. But we were talking one day, and I said, you know, Mom, you should have married me. You know how you just... I said, you should have married me, and you know, it would have been really different, because now we're friends. I'm a grown woman and a mother, and she's, you know, and she said, well, baby, if I had married you, then I couldn't have had you. And I said, well, there has to be a way that human egg can be laid. And no, it really does. We have to think about that. And since we're on our way out anyway, if we can lay human egg, we can figure out what to save and what to scramble. That's the truth. Mommy and I lived together for 32 years, and the reason that we got along is that Mommy didn't have any opinion. I sincerely hate people who have opinions. I do. If I want your opinion, I will ask. If I do not ask, I will not. And I don't give it. And so I don't have a lot of friends, but the few that I do, I always say, you never ask. No, I don't ask, because if you want to tell me something, you'll tell me. And my asking you won't make any difference. I wrote the poem. I know crying is a skill. I automatically wipe my eyes, even though I know crying is a skill. Maybe I will learn. My mother did when she thought I was asleep. I think my sister did, sleep. But sleep is as difficult to me as crying. I laugh easily, and I smile and withhold any true feelings, except once I fell in love with my 8th grade teacher and spent most of my life trying to feel safe again. Though maybe I'm safe now, after almost 30 years, which is as long as I lived with my mother. Maybe that's not a poem. Maybe that's something else. Maybe I just wanted to show my father that he needn't be cruel. Maybe I just enjoyed buying the house he had to live in, showing her she should have married me instead of him. Or maybe, since we will all soon be gone, I should be happy I found my mother in someone else who loves me. What else really matters? I really know that. That's true.
Did you really buy a house that your father moved into?
Oh, yeah. When I went back home, we were still living in his house, and he didn't, unfortunately, die, and we were in his house. And so when he got out of the hospital now, we're in his house. And so he's being what he was. And I thought, oh, what we need is a change. So I went and bought a house. I mean, we were right there in Cincinnati. I bought the house in Cincinnati, and we moved. And what I said to him was, we're moving, you can move or not, because it really didn't matter to me. And he's going to move. So he and I were having, I drink coffee, and I was having coffee one morning, and we were having, I don't think you could call it a discussion, I think it was more an argument. And he was trying to tell me something. I said, Gus, because I'm pretty calm. The chair you're sitting in is my chair. And so the floor it's sitting on is my floor. So this is not going to please him. He gets ready to get up. Said the bedroom you're going into is my bedroom. The bed you're going to stretch out in is my bed. Now let me tell you what your life is going to be for the rest of it, right? So when you wake up in the morning, you're going to say to that woman who put up with you all of these years, honey, I love you. It's so good to see you. Breakfast is so wonderful. You're going to smile, damn it. And you're going to tell her how much you care. And you're going to do that every day. Or there's a place for those of you who know Cincinnati called Longview. Or I'm going to put your ass in Longview. And you will be there. And he knew that there's enough of Gus in me. Because I always know I'm going to hell. Some people are going to hell. Mommy went to heaven. I'm going to hell. Because no. That's what, and so he did that. When we had dinner that night, he said, honey, this is a good dinner. He learned. He's smart. He learned. And so Mommy was like, it made Mommy's life happy. And when we buried him, then he's gone. And that's how I ended up with Mommy saying, you should have married me. But no, it was my house.
Did your mother know about that conversation?
I sincerely don't know if she did. I don't remember us ever having, see, Mommy is not going to ask questions. I don't know if she heard the conversation or not. I know who did hear it.
Yeah.
And I know my sister, I have an older, I'm the baby sister. And so Gary was saying, Gus is really, she called him Daddy, has really changed. And I said, yeah, because there's no discussion with that. I mean, Gary didn't want to be bothered with it, but I was the one who felt like I should be home taken. If your father is abusing your mother, somebody has to be protective. And so I tried to do that until I realized I couldn't. But I don't remember Mommy being there to hear that. I sincerely don't, but I don't know. It's one of those, I keep saying when I die, I'm going to take it. I know I'm going to hell, but I'm going to get a day pass to heaven. And there are some things I want to ask about. And I mentioned in that poem, there was a woman, Sister Althea, she was a nun, and a girl named Rose Stinson beat me up. You know how you go to school, I was in 8th grade, she beat me up. And I don't know why Rose beat me up, but she did. And Sister Althea obviously saw it, but she didn't say anything. And a couple of days later, she said, well, Nikki, why don't you stay after school? It was one of those. And we became friends. I have this ring she gave me when I graduated from 8th grade. Oh. And I have had it. I was 12 years old, and I'm 75. I've worn it every day. And I just love Sister Althea so much because it's so important we were talking earlier, to have someone to love. And I don't love I don't like a lot of people, but the few that I do, I try to be there for them. And Sister Althea was there for me, and then Grandmother was there for me. Mommy was there for me, but she had other issues. She had things that she had to do, I guess. I don't know.
How long did you live with your father before he died?
I think he died about 2 years later.
And how did your relationship with your mother change when he was gone and you
continued then we
to
became
live
happier.
Together?
I mean, I wasn't like unhappy because I'm not an unpleasant person. But once he was gone, it was good because then the house changes. I don't know if any of you are widows or anything like, but a house, and I mean no disrespect to any of the men in the room, sincerely, but a house without a man is a very different house. A house with a couple of women is just a very, the dinners are different, how you set the table is different, what you do is different. So Mommy and I always got along, and of course I had Thomas, so Thomas was not a man, but he was in the house. But the funny thing is, my grandmother, Louvenia Watson, always saved. Nothing, Grandmother didn't throw anything away. And so Mommy learned that from her. So now I'm living with Mommy because Gus is dead, we're there. And Mommy saves little pieces, if we're having a roast, you save it. If we're having leftover, you save it. And at the end of the month, she and I would do a thing called frontier soup. And we would cook it. And Thomas would come in from school and he would go, oh no, not Trump frontier soup. And I have to ask Kai if he makes it, I don't know if he makes it now, but it used to just drive him crazy because, as my grandmother said, every day she cooked and she said there were always two choices on the table. Take it or leave it. And I love that we make that, and I still do. I still make frontier soup. But it's really nice, though, you know. And I've been trying to teach Kai, and I'm working on things we're doing good. I'm trying to teach Kai how to make chitlins.
Your granddaughter.
Oh, yeah. Because, well, chitlins, first of all, are wonderful. And if you eat pork chops or if you eat that other thing, what is that stuff, barbecue, it's all a chitlin. It's all a pork, you know. And so why people are like, ew, I don't eat pork. Yeah, you're crazy when you eat chitlins. If we hadn't eaten chitlins, again, the joy of being a black American is that we helped change the culinary. We did. We made a big difference. And the only thing about chitlins, and they're so good, you can cook them all day, first of all. The only thing is you have to clean them. And so once you learn to clean chitlins, then that you put them on your cook all day, and you can go to work, and when you come home, and then you make your cornbread, and hey, take it.
So your mother moved over with you when you moved to Blacksburg.
Yeah, I was recruited by Jenny Fowler, who was a very dear friend. I was recruited by Jenny to Virginia, to Tech. And I asked Mommy, because at that point, I was thinking, well, maybe, I spent most of my life on the road, and like most artists, and I thinking, well, maybe it's time to settle down. And we had an offer, and I said to Mommy, you know, you want to go, because essentially we were married. And I wasn't going to live without. I said, you want to go? And that was a quote, and again, it always brings tears to my eyes, because she just said, whither thou goest. That's what she said. And so we moved to Virginia, but she was very close to her middle sister. And so when Mommy moved to Virginia, we call her Anto. Anto said, because Haynes died, and so Anto said, oh, I'm going to move, we called Mama Yolan, so I'm going to move with Yolan. And so Mommy Anto moved there, and then the baby sister, Agnes, said, well, everybody's there because there's only 3 of them. And so Agnes still had her husband, Reverend Clinton. He was a minister. But she and Clinton moved, so everybody moved to
They all came with you.
And it was just very nice. I tried to get them, but Mommy wouldn't, neither one of them would do. I tried to get them to have a driver, you know, like driving Miss Days, you know, driving the Watsons, but they wouldn't do it. But the idea of 90-year-old women driving was incredibly frightening. It really was, and we did it. But Ag, we called her Ag. Ag, we were playing bid whist. And we were there, and my cousin, I only have one girl cousin, Allison, and we were there, they were all at my house, and we were playing bid whist. And Agnes said, you know, and it's true, she said, I've been to every continent except Antarctica. And we just looked up, Allison and I just looked up and said, Ag, 'cause she's 90 years, if we don't go soon, somebody's not going to be here. It was like, my God. And so we did. We went out through the Panama Canal. It's a wonderful.
She went.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, you know, we weren't going to have her going to heaven and having missing one continent. But that's the truth. But the fun thing about it is, you know, when you do, which I recommend, it was just wonderful. And they stopped, and, you know, the penguins are there. Penguins carry leprosy. So whatever you do, if you're going to Antarctica, you don't want to pet the penguins. But we're going out, the penguins are about 5 miles. And so people kill me. And so we're getting off the ship, and some gentleman who didn't know us, and I won't even say what I would say normally, and he says, oh, you're going to go out for the penguins? And I said, yeah, that's what we came to see the penguin. And he said, well, she won't be able to make it. I said, what business, you know? And I'm looking at him, and he said, oh, no, he said, you know, it's about 5 miles, and be 10 miles, and she won't be able to make it. And I said, well, I'm so glad, because I try to stay calm about foolishness. I said, I'm so glad to hear that, because my attorney is Gloria Haffer, and she's rated #1 in Cincinnati, Ohio. I hope the ship leads us. I hope it does, because I could use a couple of $1 million. You know damn well the ship's not going to leave us. And so we did. We walked out, and we were not the last people on the ship, you know, and you saw because the penguins are not afraid of humans. They've never had a, you know, so they're, you know, but you don't want to pet them. Now just keep that in mind. You don't want to pet the penguin. But I can see why when they were, Magellan, why he didn't want to kill them, why he didn't want to eat them, because that just, I mean, it'd just be like eating your baby. It's just not, I mean, they're wonderful. They're just wonderful.
When you left New York to go home to Cincinnati when your father had his stroke, and then when you moved to Blacksburg, did you have a sense, you said you were thinking about settling down. Did it feel like you were recalculating the kind of life you wanted to have alongside your ambition? What was happening in that time? Did it feel like a sacrifice to leave New York City?
No, I think I had done what I was doing in New York City. I think I had finished, and I liked New York, and yeah, I got my Pradas on. You know, you can't find Pradas in Blacksburg. so you have to come to do your shopping, and, you know, you all have better restaurants. But I thought it was time to, well, I had my mom. I had responsibilities. Thomas was getting ready to go to college, and I didn't want Tom to go to college. I wanted him to go to college, but I didn't want Tom to come out of college with debt, because if you have debt, you end up working for people like Donald Trump because you need money, and I wasn't going to have that. And so Thomas graduated from Morehouse, and then he said, we were talking about, he said, well, I'd like to go to law school, so he went to Georgetown Law. I'm so glad he didn't go to Yale, because I would just be so embarrassed. No. You know, Yale needs to, and then nobody listens to me, but Yale needs to close down. They need to learn from Starbucks. When you have a fool, and you got all of these fools coming out, close down, bring all of the Yaleys together, and talk about what you're going to do, because they seem to be producing predators. And you look at that fool that if he's not snorting coke, what is he doing? Did you see him?
I saw him.
So the only thing we know is if he gets on the Supreme Court, we know that cocaine and marijuana are going to become legal, because he's doing that. And everything else. And men kill me, because men don't get pregnant. And then they're standing around saying things like, I'm against Roe versus Wade. I think that she should have the baby. Well, when we stick one up in you, it makes you mad. And then, of course, the other thing that makes me crazy is the seatbelt. And they're always talking about, you know, this is the car that I paid for, right? This is my child. This is my mother. You have to have a seatbelt or they can pull you over. And I think it's not fair to have a seatbelt. It's not fair that women have to have seatbelts if men don't have to have condoms. They say they want to protect children. Think about it. I won't get invited back.
When you joined the faculty of Virginia Tech, after years of being a writer, how did you become a teacher? Was it a skill that you felt like you had, or how did you learn how to communicate about what writing, how you got writing out of yourself, and how do you impart that on
well, first of all, I come
students?
from a family of writers. My grandfather taught Latin, and what little Latin I know from Grandpa. But he's a Fisk University graduate in 1905, and Latin was his major. He taught Latin in Knoxville, Tennessee. My mother taught school. My aunt Ann taught school, and my aunt Agnes taught school. So I come from a group of writers, a group of teachers. But I also think that, again, writing is something that it's not what you're teaching, it's what you're allowing. And so I'm always saying to my students, because we're now living in a world, I feel so sorry for the kids. I really, if I could just hug them all, I really would. Because there's so much pressure on them to do something. You know, we want them to really be famous. We want them to really make a lot of money. We want them to be on the cover of Look magazine, Life magazine, whatever those magazines, People magazine. You know, I mean, just, it's so much pressure on the kids. And what I'm saying to them is that, you know, this is your voice, and you have a right to it. And you don't have to show it off. You don't have to be something for somebody else. You can be what you are for yourself. And I think that probably the biggest difference between what I do and what even my other faculty members do is that I'm not teaching you how to write. I'm teaching you how to have confidence in yourself, to tell the story. Because again, I'm just so fortunate, and I'm teaching at a predominantly white school, which has nothing to do with anything except that it is. But I want them to recognize what a beautiful thing it is to be black, that we learned to tell a story when we could neither read nor write, had no way to pass it along except through a rhythm. And that rhythm became the spirituals, which are ultimately going to become gospel, which are going to become jazz, which are blues, which is going to become jazz. So we learned to tell that. And this is something that Americans need to learn from us. And I'm always just kind of resentful of the whole Nazi situation we have now, that people are trying to say, don't fool around with blacks are, that we you shouldn't really get to know them. Because one, you do. And I mentioned earlier, I have to believe that Elvis Presley is passing. Look at those lips. White people don't have lips that look like that. But they don't. Some historian will come along and figure it out. What we need is to find a way, again, to have faith in what we are interested in, what we are following through, what matters to us. Can I just mention one other thing we do? In G's Bend, which you just gotta love G's Bend. The women of G's Bend did, again, just something incredibly wonderful. Just took scraps. And as things didn't work, they took scraps of paper. I've written a lot about quits. They just took these little scraps, and they kept sewing them together and sewing them together. And one of my biggest regrets in life is that the first time I was in G's Bend, it's right outside in Alabama, it's right outside of Marion. The first time I should have bought it, because I could have bought a quilt then for a couple of $100s. And of course the quilts are now $10,000 hanging in the Smithsonian. And those women, again, it's what's so beautiful about the black experience, that we're really hoping America learns to appreciate the beauty. And if they don't, that's not our fault. And so everybody wants to say, oh yeah, the black people want to integrate. No, what we want is to not be lynched, and we would prefer not to be shot in the back. And the rest of it, we can deal with, And I think that it's good for everybody. It's good for everybody that we come together. Am I making?
Yeah.
I just think it's so important, but I think that we just can't keep letting people like Donald Trump and them say, oh yeah, we're doing them a favor, because you're not doing them a favor. We're doing the world a favor as we come together. And I am very fortunate to live in Appalachia, because in all fairness, the Appalachians are the best white people in America. They are. They're just wonderful people. They have stood for the Constitution. They have stood for that which is right. And we need to quit finding things that we don't want, and try to find something that makes sense as we come together. We've got to come together.
I saw you speak in Appalachia as a white Appalachian, and you were talking about slavery and the time of slavery in Appalachia, and you paused and you said, sometimes I think, what kind of slave would I have been? And it's a mostly white crowd. And then you looked up and you said, and do you ever wonder what kind of slave owners you all would have been? And I thought, I haven't. And I thought, why has no one asked me that question?
It's a good question. I had my students write, just because I was curious. I had the pleasure of knowing Rosa Parks. And of course, we all know who she is, but she was a friend too. But I was thinking about it it was last semester, and I said to my students, I wonder what the man who got on the bus, now the bus was 10 cents, Mrs. Parks had paid her a dime, and when this guy gets on, the white section of the bus is full. I wonder what he was thinking. And so I asked my students, write me a story, and not a poem, I want a story on this one. Write me a story of the white man who is standing there watching a black woman be arrested because she doesn't want to give up the same seat that she paid the dime for. I had some fabulous stories. I really did. Most of them, of course, they wanted to be nice. But what I really, really loved was the story of the jealous white man who said, "I don't know why you all are so excited about that black woman." Now, that's not the term she. I'm the one who started it all. He said, "Nobody even knows my name." You know, it's true. Nobody knows who he is, who he was. Nobody knows him. It's just interesting, you know, and the things that people get excited about. It really is interesting.
I want to ask you about the year 2005 in your life, when you lost both your mother and your sister. How did, being the youngest daughter in this family is so central in your life, how did becoming the oldest in your family left change the way you moved in the world?
I don't know. I'm still, I'm still dealing with being the oldest person in the family. You know what I just did, and I'm sorry to do this. My cousin, Terry, is dying, and he's in hospice. Okay. And I heard my phone.
Yeah.
And I carry my phone right now because I know that we know that Terry's not going to make it, but I said no matter where I am, if it's about him, I'm going to answer it. And so, I don't know, it was just, you go from being the baby, and and again, we were talking about crying and not crying. Well, you don't have time to cry because your mother has passed. Mommy died on June the 24th, and Gary died on July, I think July 10th, if I'm not mistaken. So it was just don't, and you buried them. Then Anto died October 29th, but then my dog Wendy died. And so it was, you know, and you had things to do, and so you got them done because I don't think women, period, of any color, I don't think women cry nearly as much as the novels that we read tell us that. You know, in the novels they're always crying. I don't think we do. I think we do what has to be done. And I've tried to be, I get calls, and I didn't mean to, but I knew that I needed to, I heard it, and I needed to take that. And I told Allison, because she's the one right now, she's my other girl. Yeah, and I said, call me, you know, let me know what happened. I can't do it. Terry's going to pass. He's going to transition, and Terry's a good man, so he's going to get to go with his mother. I said, well, I know one thing, that when Terry transitions, he's going to heaven because he'll go with the girls, all of the Watsons, and he's the last of the Chapman. And the Giovannis, there are three Giovannis now because I'm here, and I'm 75, so how long is that? And Tommy's here, and Kai. So we have, but Thomas had the sense to have a daughter, so there's
could be more coming.
There's a possible, a bit. But the Fords, they're the only real people in group of the Fords because the family's down to, when we lose Terry, the family will be down to 8. And so we're, you know, it's interesting. And a man that I loved a great deal, his name was Charles Steger, he was the president of Virginia Tech. We were very close. And Dr. Steger died. And Janet, his wife, asked me if I would speak. Charles was important. I was the only woman on stage, actually, because the governor was there and the senators and things were there. And I called the hospital, which you're not supposed to be able to do. I called the hospital and I said, what time did Dr. Steger die? And they said, we're not supposed, you know how you go there, they're not supposed to tell. And I said, all right, please, I know all of that. I'm just asking you what time did he die. Just answer the question and I won't, you know. Because I wanted to know, because it was in my mind. And he died at 9 o'clock, which means it was dark. And that's what I just want to know, was it dark or light? And I wrote a poem. It's not in this book, it's gone. And it just said, if you notice that the sun came out at 9 o'clock at night, it was my mother opening the door to heaven to let Dr. Steger see his way in. And, you know, you start to write things like that, and so you spend all your time crying. But, no, I could see Mommy and Dr. Steger. Dr. Steger was a great man, and I loved him so much, and I was so pleased that Janet asked me to speak, because I'm not that good at occasional poems, as they put it. There are things you can't do, but that was one when she said that. I could just see, the one thing that I could see is that Dr. Steger went to heaven and Mommy opened the door. And he drank beer and scotch too. So I knew that when they got up into heaven, they were like, yeah, come on, Charles, let's have a drink.
They're having fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, Jesus drank wine. And I'm sure it was good. They didn't say he drank champagne. They said he drank wine. So I'm sure, he did red wine. So he was a smart man.
And after you lost your mother, but you spent your entire adult life living almost alongside her, almost your entire adult life. Did you find yourself living differently when you didn't have your mom watching?
I don't think Mom watched, but I don't, you're asking questions that if I live another 20 years or so, maybe I'll get to think them through and ask. I don't think Mommy did that. I think Mommy knew that the best thing to do is to leave me alone. So Mommy didn't, as I said, Mommy didn't have any opinion on my life. I don't know, Gary's gone, so it was not a question that I had asked Gary, and now, I don't know if Mommy had an opinion about Gary, but I know she didn't have an opinion about me, and I know she knew me well enough not to have an opinion because that would have ruined our relationship. I did not have an opinion about her, which, again, kept our relationship. I don't have an opinion about my aunts. I don't have opinions. And so I just went ahead, and I'm not convinced. I think death is a bad word. I'm not convinced that anything dies. I met a kid, not my granddaughter. I met a little 12-year-old, and she was very sad, because so much pressure on the kids. And I had just met her, and she was saying, oh, Nikki, I knew her mother. She said, Nikki, I don't know what to do. She said, I'm ugly. I'm just a weed. And first of all, she's not. I said, think you're good looking. I said, but I don't understand weed. I'm talking to a 12-year-old. I said, I don't understand weed. She said, well, weed's just something you pick up and throw away. And I said, no, because a weed, as far as I can see, is something that we haven't learned what to do with. Because anything you put in water is going to grow. And I said, I don't know what you are. And I meant that to her, because I'm not helpful. I said, I don't know what you are, but I know that once you find what works, then it's going to work for you. But weed is not a good term. And I think that death is not a good term because I think we transition. I think that if I put any of us in the ground, something's going to grow. And some of it, I've got bones, I've got teeth, so some of the teeth are not going to be useful. But some of them, somebody will find 100 years from now and polish it, and it'll be a diamond, or it'll be that there's something useful. But I wanted to bring, by the way, I do a thing called the Wednesday Club. I have a friend. We want to do a podcast. We're beginning to learn how to do it. Kay Graham is a critic, and I make up stuff, and that's what. But one of the things that we were talking about, because one of the things I totally hate is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and I do. I think it's the most vicious song that anybody. It teaches people to be bullies. Because Rudolph, and they laugh at him, and he's got this red nose, and nobody will play with him and everything. And I know Santa and Mrs. Claus have to look out and see that Rudolph is by himself and nobody cares about him. But then when Santa needs him, he comes. And all of a sudden, there's, Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? And if I had been Rudolph, I would have said, kiss my red nose. I would have. It's so American, Santa's so Donald Trumpish. When you need something, all of a sudden, no. Remember, America didn't like Negroes until they needed somebody to fight Schmeling, and then they called Joe Louis, right? Or they needed somebody to run in the Olympics, and then they called Jesse Owens. And Santa needed somebody like, oh yeah, come and do. Never. And I think that we can't keep having children sing these songs as if somehow this makes sense. And I hate, I do, and I don't do Thanksgiving because I think it's stupid, but I also think it makes we never think about, not the turkey that's going to have its head cut off, because turkey don't have its head cut off. Yeah, they crucified Jesus, they crucified me, I can handle that. It's the turkey that's left. And the turkey that's left, that is the friend, is going to say, did I do something that they're taking my friend? How will I go back? How will I redo? Am I making sense? And I think I think that's a horrible thing that we do because it's on television. Everybody's like, oh, they're going to pardon the turkey. What did the turkey do? Turkey didn't do anything. I think it's a stupid thing. If you're going to eat turkey, damn it, eat it. But don't act like you're doing some favor. Because you're not. But this turkey has to live with the fact that somehow or another I'm here, and that which I have loved and been close to is now gone. And it's some kind of a joke to you people.
Yeah.
I'm
following you.
Things annoy me, though. But you can see, being bothered with me.
Well,
but I don't do turkey. I don't do turkey anything. I don't do turkey. And I eat beef, and it's, I'm sure that the cows probably feel the same way, but the cows are not my friends, and we don't do that. Did you see the cows in Atlanta?
In Atlanta?
Yeah,
in the show Atlanta?
The truck.
In Atlanta. I don't know about the cows in Atlanta. Do you all know about the cows in Atlanta?
It was on the news. The truck turned over and the cows got out. And so everybody was like, oh, the cows are running away. Well, hell, wouldn't you if somebody... I loved it. And it knocked a couple of the sheriffs down, and the sheriff was upset because, the cow was upset with me. Oh, the cow should have killed you. That's what you were going to do.
So we're going to take questions in about 6 minutes, so think about your questions. But I do want to ask you, because if death is a word that you don't think is a good word, I do love the way you talk about aging. Aging does not seem to have that negative connotation for you.
No.
Tell me about being 75 and feeling yourself aging. What have you noticed?
Well, I've noticed, first of all, 75 is a real good age. And, you turn 50, and whoever thinks of, like, I'm going to be 50, but now you find yourself 75, and you're talking to your friends, you say, oh, when I was 50. And that just... But the chances are, and it's not sad or anything, the chances of living another 25 years... For people like me, I've had breast cancer, and I've had a lung cancer, so I'm like half. I keep saying what we need to do, aside from learning how to lay a human egg, is we need to figure out, because my left lung is gone and my right breast is gone. Not that anybody, my doctor said, I tell you, Gregory. I love Gregory. He's crazy. When we found this lump, he said, well, Nikki, we can do chemotherapy or we can take the breast off. And I said, well, Gregory, you're the doctor, He said, well, Nick, you're 75 years old. What you going to do with it? And he was right. It's done all it's going to do, so take it off. And so we did that. But, you figure the older you get, they're just things that you look at really differently. I would have been distressed if I had had breast cancer at 20 because I did have, somebody might want to play with it or something. But nobody can be bothered with it now, so what the hell? And what you're doing as you grow older is enjoying you're just enjoying it's come the time. You're a quilt. There's pieces of you that are being put together, and you're figuring out, okay, and who do I embrace and how do I embrace it? I think old age is wonderful. I don't know why. I think old age, and I know that gaining weight, and Greg wants me to gain weight, and so that's another problem, because everybody talks about losing weight, and everybody's like, oh, you have to lose weight. The hardest thing is gaining weight, and he's gotten me eating ice cream, and I never thought I would dislike ice cream, but ice cream is one of the reasons, of course, that human beings are being pushed out, because the sea urchin is eating kelp, and the kelp, as we know, goes into the ice cream. And so when that happens, then the worm is going to come.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. It really is. But of course, I'll be gone. But I'm a big fan of spirits too.
And how do you think about time and productivity and work at this stage in your life? Do you feel a pressure to get more out because you have more to say, or do you feel a exhale?
I enjoy it. And I ought to be ashamed of myself. The book that I'm mostly getting finished right now is the only book that nobody has any claim to. And I'm supposed to be, and I am going to get it done. I'm working on a book on Tupac. And I finally realized how it's going to end, but I can't figure out how to get there. And that's the disadvantage of being a poet, because I have seen, when Pac dies, I have seen that the stars write Thug Life. So I've seen, it's a children's book, so I know what I want it to look like, but I can't quite figure out how I'm going to get him from Los Angeles to Vegas, which is where he's going to die. I have a tattoo.
Thug Life on your arm.
Yeah, and I got that because I thought, and I didn't know Pac, I didn't know his mother, I didn't know Fanny, but I thought that she should know, if she would ever hear about it, that somebody cared. Because you lose your child, it's nobody wants to lose their child. I think it's unfair because we birthed you, and I think you all should bury us. And I think it just goes that way. And I think that if cops think that they're superior and they're so great, then they ought to be able to walk around without a gun. You shouldn't need a gun. I didn't need a gun to rear a son or a dog, so I don't know why you do. And I just think that guns are a bad idea. So there are some things. And the New York Times, which has become a friend, I guess, of mine, somebody in the Times heard that I had a tattoo, and they called and said, can we take maybe take a picture. And I said yes, and they ended up putting it in the Times. You can find it in the magazine. And Afeni saw it, and she wrote me a letter, and I framed it, and I have it at home. I look at it every day. And I was sorry that Afeni left, too, because it has to be hard to lose your child. And I just did that. And I was invited to do this, but this book is not done. And I'm working on a book with birds because I love birds, and of course, probably because they eat worms. But but I'm working with a woman named Pat Moss, and I don't know if you know she's a painter, and Pat and I are working on a book. And Pat says, "Well, Nick, you need to send me some poems," and I'm saying, "Pat, you need to send me some birds." So we haven't quite gotten that done, and I'm hoping we're working mentally on the Cincinnati Zoo manager is Zane Thackeray, and we are talking about, and I think it's going to end up being a podcast that he and I are going to sit down and talk about the animals in the zoo and how we handle and what we do. And
I love that.
Oh yeah,
Nikki Giovanni talks animals for a zoo podcast.
Oh yeah, I think it would be because one, I love Zane, and of course Zane's heart was broken when they had to kill the gorilla, and so it was just so wonderful that Fiona, the hippo. And I collect hippos. If you come to my house, there's a billion. I mean, I collect hippos. And so it was just really nice. He and I could talk about that. And I was so glad that Fiona lived, because it wasn't, they were talking about, people are so stupid, so you want to get a couple of things said. It wasn't that Fiona's mother was turning away from her. It's that Fiona's mother could not do any better. And so somebody had to help Fiona. And it was one of the few good things that human beings did, because she was being fed 24 hours a day until she gained enough weight that she could. And then her mother was able to feed her. And I thought it was so wonderful, because it's the kind of thing that we all need to talk about, that there is some good in human beings. One day Donald Trump and them will be gone, and we'll go back to trying to do something good, because we have to find there's some good in us. And I don't know how to, and when you see things like that, it just makes you proud of being a human being, that people fed that hippo 24 hours a day to keep her alive. I just thought, wow. And now we've got, immigrant children that everybody's like, well, I'm not sure. I was so glad to see that Americans said, oh no, these children deserve to be with their parents. We have to send them back. And of course, Trump, being a liar and a fool, is not doing what he should do. But nonetheless, and that's the truth. But these kids deserve to be with their parents. But then I'm a big fan of adoption, because there are times that parents, especially I think it must be hard on mothers, know that they can't do anything more for their child. So an adopted child was not, ew, your mother threw you away. It's that your mother loved you enough to try to give you a better chance. And it's time that we dealt with that it's a difficult thing to give up your child, to say, oh, if this child is going to go do something better, I'm going to have to give it a chance. And you just get tired of stupid people saying stupid things to try to make people feel bad. These are difficult decisions, and you want your child to have the best that you can give it.
So you have more work to do. That's what I'm hearing.
I guess.
Before we go to questions, I want to ask you, Nikki, to read one of my favorite poems of yours. It's called Choices.
I love choices. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have choices with me. If I can't do what I want to do, then my job is to not do what I don't want to do. It's not the same thing, but it's the best I can do. If I can't have what I want, then my job is to want what I've got and be satisfied that at least there is something more to want. Since I can't go where I need to go, then I must go where the signs point, though always understanding parallel movement isn't lateral. When I can't express what I really feel, I practice feeling what I can't express, and none of it is equal, I know. But that's why mankind, alone, among the mammals, learns to cry.
So now we're going to take questions, and we have microphones on this right here and here. So just raise your hand if you have a question. We have time for a few. Who has a question? You have a question? Right here?
Hi, thank you so much for coming and doing this, and you're just an amazing person. You were talking about how when you were young, you went to Birdland, and you were just like, I want to read, what do I have to do to read? And how old were you at the time? You were in your you were 25?
Yeah.
And then you did the same thing for Lincoln Center. And as a poet, I'm really blown away with your accomplishments. And I just wonder if you're so confident, and I want to know if you ever had any doubt or self-doubt, or did you just push forward? I know a lot of people write and produce, but I mean, I know people who write and just write stuff and never show it to anybody. And how did you find this courage to just and the bravery to show yourself to the world right off the bat at such a young age?
Thank you.
I don't know. All they could say is no. Now that makes a big difference, and all I could do, I'm always laughing at my sister. Gary was a pretty woman, and Gary had dimples, and she had clear skin. You could see my skin as messed up. She could sing, she could dance, she could play the piano. You know, all of those, none of which I can do. Grandmother tried to teach me to play the piano, by the way, and I was down there one summer. She called, all of us were down there. William and Terry is the one who's having problems, who's going to die now. William has already passed. And she would call us in, and she was trying to teach us piano. And you try to, make your grandmother happy. And she was trying to teach, I guess, do, re, mi, whatever it was. But grandmother used to have that yellow pencil, and I missed a note, and she hit my finger. And I just, because I'm a calm person, I said, Grandmother, if you're going to be abusive, I did. And I remember, abusive, she said, well, I'll be darned. And that was it. I never learned to play the piano. I'm sorry now that I didn't, but I wasn't. She gonna sit there and beat me about it some damn late. So I didn't have much to do but watch. It's a long answer. And if all you have to do is watch, then you're going to end up probably being a writer. So I wrote, and I'm not embarrassed. I don't think I've done something that you go like, oh, damn, I don't want people to know, it's one doesn't have secret. First of all, now, if there's any one thing that the kids know, that the young people know now, there are no secrets. There might have been in my age that things happened that nobody knew about or didn't get talked about or something like that. But nowadays, everything is known. So the best thing to do is just put your best foot forward and see how it works, if it works for you. Some things you don't particularly want to share, and we were talking earlier, some things are you're just not ready. You know that you don't know enough to talk about them, so you're going to wait until you learn something. I think that's what it is, and again, it's your voice, and so you have to figure out, how am I using it? What am I going to do with it? Some things you're ready to say, some things you're not. Some things you're ready to, get done. Some things you're not.
Thank you. Who else has a question? Right here.
I was reading one of your early poems where you were talking about writing a poem and said maybe it's not a time for poems, it's time to get out the kerosene and get your gun ready. And as someone who's of your generation, at a time when people really did think that there was going to be a radical change in our lifetime, maybe 40 years ago, and now you've lived through these succeeding decades, what do you make of that in terms of the possibilities of the kind of change that is needed in society?
Well, you think a lot of different. I mean, I love those poems. Or, if you go back to Black Feeling, Black Talk, Black Judgment, I wouldn't write those at 75. What kind of 75-year-old woman writes that stuff? I mean, you're grown and you know better. But as a young person, and we did. The one major disappointment I had with Barack Obama is that he did not use his power of pardon to get the civil rights people out of prison, which he should have done, and just should have done. If you got Trump letting rapists and murderers, we should have had. Rap Brown should not be in prison. I mean, there are just things like that. And I think now, first of all, we had a problem at school. We have, I teach at Tech, and the English department is having a bit of a problem one way or the other. And I don't really I'm a University Distinguished Professor, so I don't really do the meetings and stuff like that, but I happen to be talking to...
Privilege of the job.
But I happen to be talking to one of them, and I realized, and I said it without thinking, sometimes you just have to let the Lord, just wait on the Lord. Job waited till the flesh fell from his bone. Everything Job had was gone, but then Job waited on the Lord. Why can't you and I? And I just, I probably wouldn't even have thought that 50 years ago, even though I know the spiritual. So there are some things you say, well, the Lord can take away, and I'm not going to waste my time. The kids I love, and I have the bag not with me right here, but I love Black Lives Matter. I think that they are incredible. I think that what they're doing is a really good thing. I think the kids are great. I wear my Black Lives Matter T-shirt most of the time. I really, really love Me Too. I think the Me Too vision, I think that this is important. But I'm an old woman, so this is not something that people ask you, they'll call you, and it's not, if you had asked that, I wouldn't have answered. It's not something that I have an opinion about. The kids have an opinion, and they're doing, I think, a good job. So when I run into them, and I say, I really love the work that you're doing. I went out the other day and just took my credit card and went through Nike, and I bought my Nike high. I did, because I think what they did for Capra, I think that they're right. Colin was right to take a knee. So I have my tennis shoes, I have my socks, I have my sweatpants, I have my shirt. I went through the whole thing, and I did, and I wore it to school. And because we do a lot with Nike. Well, I'm very proud of Colin, but it's not an opinion. It's just, I'm an old woman, I should support that. I do support that. And if I go, which I probably will not be invited, to a football game, Virginia Tech, we're numbered, I think, 24 right now, but we play football. And so if I would find myself at a game, which I'm sure I won't, I'll have to take a knee. I just will, and that'll probably end my teaching career, because somebody will want to fire me, and it's fine, that's what, I'm not going to starve to death, and I'm old. If I do, it won't take a long time to get that. So, no, but you have to take a knee on things like that, because Colin was right. Something is wrong, and he's trying to do what he can do. We're all trying to do what we can do. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's just the way I look at it.
So you have a question too? Can we just move the mic right up?
Hi. I wanted to ask you about some of your earlier work and the pushback you may have received about writing in vernacular and abbreviating Black to BLK and things like that. How did you make sure that your voice and the way you wanted to express your voice stayed true to you while maybe other people were like, no, this needs to be clearer or whatever? Like, how did you deal with that pushback, if any?
That's a hard question. I just did what I believed in, and I don't want to sound indifferent because I'm not like indifferent, like that. But I really don't care what other people think, because if you let other people start to think, it gets to be a problem. It was all I could do to deal with my mother and father, and if you let people you don't even know have some opinion about what you're doing. Well, I hate opinion. I've said that before. I don't know anything on earth I hate as much as opinions. And so you're just trying to do what you do, and they can take it or shove it. It doesn't. You just have to do what you do. And I think I'm, pleasant enough. But I am. Don't you pleasant?
You are.
And I'm not friendly, and I have always admitted that. I'm not a friendly person, but I think I have good manners and stuff. And I don't think that my job is to have somebody say, oh, I think my job is to do what I believe in. And of course, as I was saying, we were talking earlier, the Bible is really an interesting story because, again, the advantage of being Black is that we learned it without being able to read or write. And so one of the things that is interesting to me, I've gotten into the manger, I've gotten into, well, of course, the mice, because the least of these did an incredible job. And we don't have any, I don't know that much Latin, but we don't have any Latin where Mary said, oh, get that mouse away. The mouse was all of these things. And so we have to think about how we respond to the least of these. And the only way we can respond to the least of these is that we do our job. Am I? Mm-hmm. And I think that, and I do think that Joseph was outside smoking pot or something, because we don't have anything of Joseph being in there holding her hand or helping, do we?
Nope.
And we know that when Jesus was crucified, and that'll be another long stand, I'm not here preaching, but we know that only two people were at the cross, and that was John, the beloved disciple, and Mary, and that Jesus asked John to take care of my mother, and they went to Turkey. So if I do live long enough to get some more studying done, and we know that Mary was buried, we do know that, was buried in Turkey. It would be interesting if I can discover some of, am I making sense? And so that's all that interests me, because I come from a people who were not allowed to read and write, and yet they carried the story. So it seems like a part of my responsibility, but not a burden. But if there's a light that my mother can open up for someone I love to come to heaven, there ought to be something that I learn that I can share, that the kids can carry forward. It's just so basic.
We have time for 2 more questions. Let's go right here.
Thank you. Just thank you and thank you. And you wrote Gemini. This was my first introduction to you, which I adore. And I'm curious what made you at 25 decide to write an autobiography?
Who knows?
And will you write another one?
No. No. I don't know why. I didn't drink until I went to Virginia Tech, so. Well, when your father's an alcoholic, you don't. And it was really funny because when I went to Virginia Tech, I study wines, and one of the things that makes me know that no matter what happens in my life, I have an incredible wine cellar, and I will never be poor because I'll just sell my wine, because I've been collecting it. But I don't know why I wanted to write Gemini. I think that, who knows, writers write. I mean, that's what we do. I guess one time, maybe sometime, I would love to write a cookbook, because I think I cook a little different. The thing that makes my fried chicken so great, and I don't mind sharing this, is ginger. Yeah. See, I cook it in butter, unsalted, of course, and I cook it on, 250, but it's the ginger that makes it special. And I say, oh, if I have a minute, I'm going to sit down and write a cookbook sometime. You just want to do things that you enjoy and that you can share out. I like Gemini. I thought it was nice. And again, it's one of those things that you don't ever know, because now I have a publisher, and now I had, and you never know. I mean, you're a writer. You never know what people will accept or not. You never know. And so you ask, would you like to publish this? Or William Morrow came to me after Black Feeling. They put Black Feeling and Black Talk together, and they said, we'd like to publish it, and it was fine. And then I didn't realize I was supposed to ask for an advance, because I didn't think about it that way. And so they were like, oh, no, you have to ask for an advance. But I just did a book with Ashley Bryan called I Am Loved. It was a children's book. It's so pretty if you like I Am Loved. You have to get, and I realized, because I had never realized that before, poets don't get any. When they called and they said, is this, I'm not going to deal, but they said, is this acceptable to you? Because this is what Ashley gets, and we want you to have the same thing. I just went, well, I'll be damned. After all of these years of writing, poets don't get any of it. I mean, we're lucky to get some free books. And they sent Ashley, and they did. They sent Ashley like a box. And Ash is 94. And he called me. Darling, did you see our book? I said, Ash, they haven't sent me any book. Oh, I've got a box here. I'll send you some. So what the hell is that? I wrote the poetry, right? I don't count. And so being a poet will teach you to be humble. You just go on because they don't care about you, and you're trying to get a few books out, and that's, oh God, it makes you humble. It really does. Yes, ma'am, you're right in front of me.
Can you talk about your career in TV?
In
TV.
I know that the record industry is a industry of thieves, and therefore the only way to deal with the record industry, I'm sincere, for me, is to not pay any attention. I have an attorney, and Gloria's been my attorney. She's now the person that I have known longest on earth. When my mother died, she's the person I've known longest on earth. I've known Gloria longer than anybody else. But I don't try to deal with any of that, because the CD, all of the record industry steals. I mean, that's what they do. And if you think about it, it'll make you unhappy. So rather than be unhappy, I let Gloria handle it, because she's a lawyer and they just love doing those things. So it makes her happy, and it keeps me from being unhappy. I have no idea about it. They say, will you do it? And we do it. I signed this thing. Will you sign this? And I sign it. And, I sign whatever they give me. And I'm laughing because I always say that we're back to Gregory. I always say that if Gregory gets tired and wants to kill me, he'll just say, take this. And I'll just take it, whatever it is. It's like, okay, Greg, if I should take, because there's just some things you can't be bothered with. It'll make you crazy. And you can't be a poet and want to be rich. So you find someone. I run a very small office, Gloria and Jenny, and they take care of the things that I don't, because both of them like doing what they do. And I like having them do it, so everybody's happy.
And did you have a particular question about her time in TV? She also is wondering about the TV show Soul.
That's been it was in NPR, and it's been a bit of a mess, because Melissa Hazlett, Ellis's cousin, won and has done a film called Mr. Soul, and she did that, and getting some of the film, and I'm saying it again because it's simply the truth. There was nothing I could do about it. I told Gloria, we'll sign whatever they want, but I didn't think it was a good film, and I didn't think it was a good film because I didn't think it showed Ellis. We had to decide, are we going to show Soul or are we going to show Ellis? And I think that they didn't show how the film. One of the most important people in that show that helped produce that show was, of course, Novella Nelson. And it was Novella who taught Ellis, the first thing she said is that we have to have someone to do makeup and do hair. And that's because it made it professional. And that was important. Ellis would come to me a lot to say, we talked at least once a week, which is how I got to know the New York Community Choir. We talked once a week about who will be on the show. Ellis, as we all know, was gay. And so he was always afraid that people wouldn't talk to him. I said, Ellis, you got a TV show. Everybody's going to talk to you. So whether it's Louis Farrakhan, he said, Farrakhan won't come on my show. I said, Ellis, believe me, ask Louis, because all he can say is no. All Muhammad Ali can say. They were all pleased to do that. They're not trying to, go to bed with you. They're just trying to be on TV. So go on and do it. And so I think there's still a lot to be done. And the film is out there, and the people who do film will have to do it. I think that we missed a lot, and I think that I think it wasn't a good film that I saw. So
We're going to have to leave it there, but remember there is a book signing in the lobby afterwards. Thank you, Nikki Giovanni.
thank you.